guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to make a banana chiffon cake. This is a really smooth, soft, and spongy cake that is quite healthy and really fast to make since we're using a blender to blend all the ingredients together. I also really like this recipe because you can pair it with practically any type of frosting and it tastes good either way. So let's get started. First, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is very important that you preheat your oven ahead of time because once the chiffon cake batter is ready, you want to set it straight into the oven. If you leave it out for too long, then the air bubbles inside of the meringue could deflate and the cake won't be as soft and spongy. So now I'm going to mix together my dry ingredients. So I have some all-purpose flour here, and I'm going to add in my sugar. So in this recipe, there is 20 grams of sugar and 100 grams of sugar. The 20 grams goes into the batter just to thin it out and make it easier to work with, and the 100 gram goes into the egg whites. Also add in the salt, baking powder, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Now the two spices are optional here, but they do add a lot of flavor. And then just mix it all together. So now I'm going to separate my egg whites from the egg yolks. Every time you're working with egg whites when you want to beat them up, make sure that everything that comes in contact with it is completely dry and clean. If there is any water or grease that comes into these egg whites, there is a chance that they're not going to beat up into stiff peaks. So just make sure that everything is nice and clean. Now I'm going to move on to my cake batter. So today I'm going to be using my blender to blend all of the dry ingredients and wet ingredients together to make sure everything is perfectly smooth. So first I'm going to measure out the amount of bananas that I'm going to add into this recipe. This usually takes about 2 to 3 bananas, but it will depend on the size. So I like to measure it just to make sure every recipe comes out the same. Try and use bananas that are nice and ripe because those tend to be more sweet. You're going to need 350 grams of bananas for this recipe. Add in the egg yolks and the flavorless oil. And now just blend it until completely smooth. Now to that I'm going to add in the dry ingredients. And just blend it until completely combined. You can see it's nice and smooth, no lumps. Alright, now just set this aside and we're going to beat the egg whites. I'm using my stand mixer to beat my egg whites, but of course you can use a hand mixer. I wouldn't suggest you to do it by hand since there is quite a bit of egg whites to beat here. So I'm going to add my egg whites into my stand mixer bowl, and again make sure it's nice and clean. I'm using my whisk attachment and just beat it until frothy. Once you can see that the egg whites has become foamy, add in your first stage of sugar. Then continue beating until the egg whites start becoming thicker. The meringue has now turned white and you should start being able to see the tracks of the beater inside of the egg whites, so add it in your second stage of sugar. You want to make sure you don't add all of your sugar in at once because it won't dissolve as easily. Now just beat until it starts to thicken. The egg whites has grown in size and it should be able to hold a soft peak. You can see it could hold a peak, but it has hooked over, so that's soft peaks. Now add in your last bit of sugar. And now just beat until stiff peaks form, but make sure you do not overmix. You can see the egg whites can now hold a peak all on its own straight up. It doesn't hook over. That means it is ready. You should also be able to flip the bowl over and nothing should fall off. That means your egg whites are ready, so now we can combine it with the batter. So now I'm going to combine the meringue with the batter, and the batter can change colors a little bit since the banana does brown when it comes in contact with air. I'm going to start off by mixing a little bit of the meringue into the batter. This just helps thin it out, lighten it up a little bit to make it easier to combine into the rest of the meringue. So you don't have to worry about folding too much in this case. Just mix it together until there are no more lumps because this is just to make it easier for the batter to transition into the meringue. Now I'm going to add in a little bit more of the meringue. When I first add the meringue, I like to go back and forth like this. It just helps combine it a lot quicker and easier. And then I start folding it in like so. So you go around the bowl and flatten through the center, and you just continuously going like this until you don't really see much lumps of the meringue. If you see that the lumps aren't going into the batter or disappearing, you can go over the top like this a little bit, or go around the sides of the bowl, pressing it against it. It also helps break up the lumps of meringue. But just make sure you don't overdo it because you don't want to deflate the meringue completely, or else your cake won't be as soft and spongy. Pour the rest of the meringue into the batter. And this last bit you want to carefully fold in because you need the lightness and the airiness of the meringue in order to make this cake nice and fluffy. The batter is now at a nice and smooth consistency, so do not overmix it, or once again you will end up with a really tough cake that is dense and not fluffy. So now I'm going to pour it into a cake pan and then send it right into the oven, because you never want to leave this type of batter out for too long or it will deflate, and once again you'll end up with a dense cake. So I'm using a chiffon cake pan with a removable bottom and a funnel in the center. Make sure you do not grease your pan in any way or put parchment paper on the bottom or sides, because you actually want the cake to kind of stick to the pan a little bit to help it rise. You can also use a regular cake pan. It doesn't have to have one. It doesn't have to have a funnel in the center, but again, you do not want to grease it or put parchment paper on the sides. So when you're pouring the cake into the cake pan, you want to hold it up really nice and high and allow it to fall into the cake pan so that it pops all of the huge air pockets, so you don't end up with empty spaces inside of your cake in the end. This is the exact same process as the one I've showed you in my orange chiffon cake. Make sure to go check that video out if you want to learn how to make an orange chiffon cake as well. So I'm just going to hold my bowl very high and allow it to drip slowly. Now take a wooden skewer and swirl it around inside of the cake batter. And this is also just a step to help prevent any huge air pockets inside of the cake. But make sure you're not using a really thick object like a chopstick, because you don't want to create even more air bubbles inside of the cake. By doing this, you're also helping flatten out the cake to make sure it rises nice and evenly. Once you've done it a couple of times, you want to stop, don't overdo anything. And our very last step is to bang it on the counter a couple of times to release the air bubbles. This is just the same step as you always do when it comes to cakes. And since this has a removable bottom, I like to hold on to the funnel center so it doesn't come up when I'm banging it on the counter. Now into the oven this goes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for around 55 minutes, or until the top is nice and golden brown, and when you insert a skewer into the center, it comes out. The cake is now cooked, so I'm going to flip it over upside down onto a cooling rack, and you need to make sure that you let it cool upside down because this prevents it from falling too much, so you won't have a hollow cake in the end. So I'm just going to leave it on the cooling rack until it has cooled completely. Now the cake is cooled completely, so I'm going to remove it from its cake pan with the help of a butter knife. So I'm just going to run it around the edges, and make sure you are pressing the cake against the side of the cake pan so you don't actually cut through the cake accidentally. That's how you make this banana chiffon cake. You can see it looks really great even though it has no frosting involved. It is a really simple cake to make. It has a really nice and strong banana flavor even though the texture of the cake is really soft, moist, and really spongy as well. This is a great regular basic cake recipe, so you can pair it with whatever type of frosting you like and decorate it however you like. You can throw it into a regular cake pan so it doesn't have a hole down the center, and you can use it as a birthday cake or any type of cake for a special occasion since it has a really special flavor. This is quite a healthy recipe, so I really hope you can try this out. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time. Bye!